Sheep in the Big City. Never has a title so accurately described a show's premise while completely subverting expectations. Airing from 2000 to 2002, Sheep in the Big City was a Cartoon Network original that sounds enough like your typical animated show. A sheep leaves his familiar farm life to live in the city, while simultaneously trying to avoid capture from a secret military organization. While people mostly tend to recall the show's bizarrely nonchalant name and its unique central figure, not many remember the actual episodes themselves. Having been years since I myself watched it, I went back into the series anticipating a slapstick-filled affair, but to my astonishment, not only was it a wacky animated jaunt, but it may be one of the most esoteric children's comedies I've ever seen. It's a grab bag of complex comedic ideas set against the backdrop of a fine art lover's world that will stimulate, or maybe even overstimulate, every humorous sense you have in your body. It's underappreciated and over the top. We're talking about Sheep in the Big City. The story of Sheep in the Big City begins near the Windy City, with the birth of creator Mo Willems. Born February 11, 1968 in Des Plaines, Illinois, Willems and his family would move to New Orleans, where he spent a majority of his childhood. According to Volume 71 of Authors and Artists for Young Adults, when he was 3 or 4 years old, he started to draw and create his own characters, and enjoyed writing stories about his characters to share with others. Willems stated in a 2001 interview with Animation World Network, "My desire as a kid was to find a way to be funny and draw. Animation turned out to be the best way for me to do that." His passion for art and humor would be prevalent throughout his young adult life, ultimately influencing his decision to attend New York University's Tisch School of the Arts. After graduating, Willems spent a year traveling around the world, drawing a cartoon every day. And upon returning to the US, namely New York, Willems began his entertainment career, performing both sketch and stand-up comedy, which turned into an opportunity to work as a writer and animator for Sesame Street. In 1996, Willems secured the chance to create a cartoon that was to air on the Nickelodeon variety program Kablam. He ended up making The Offbeats, a show about a group of kids who deal with daily life and a roving gang of bullies. So how do we get from working on Sesame Street to producing a 4-minute cartoon segment on Nickelodeon to a full 30-minute episode series on Cartoon Network? With The Offbeats coming to an end after 2 seasons, Willems' professional trajectory continued its ascent. Speaking with Animation World Network, Willems explains the process to getting the chance to make his own 30-minute cartoon. "It was serendipitous. Right around the time it seemed obvious that The Offbeats wasn't going any further, I got the call from Cartoon Network, and they said, 'If you have anything, we'd like to see it.' They came to New York and I had 2 ideas. One was a superhero idea, and the other a space idea. They said, 'We can't wait to hear what you have to say, but we have 2 rules. No superheroes, no space.' I was sure that it was going to be the worst pitch of my career. So instead of talking about the specifics, I talked about the type of show I wanted to do. We went out to dinner and talked about what we liked and what kind of cartoons were fun to make. I enjoyed The Offbeats, but I wanted to go back to something more like the performance art and sketch I did when I was younger. From there, the idea of a sheep being in a show somehow came out. I went away for a month with my wife to Amsterdam, where I worked on ideas. And as to why the show starred a sheep, he says, because they're funny, because they're stupid, and sheep is easier to pun than hippopotamus. I like the idea of a pack animal that always has to be in a group, having to be alone. It's so much more painful for a sheep to be alone in the big city than an eagle or a solitary animal. Now that the premise for the show had been conceived, there needed to be a voice breathed into it, and his influences can be felt in watching sheep. The first was a central theme. I have always felt alienated. My folks are immigrants, I grew up in a very closed society in the South, my father stayed home and threw pottery, my mother had a career, which was very unusual in New Orleans. I decided to become an animator as opposed to a banker. There's a lot of ways in which I was an outsider, but this theme keeps coming back. Not because of me, but because I think we're all alienated. It's universal. Interestingly, Williams credits 2 additional sources on how he tells sheep stories, hearkening to his background in first, sketch comedy, quote, Monty Python, and particularly John Cleese, broke almost all of the rules, did all sorts of wild things without becoming malicious. There was great, goofy fun to it all. I think popular entertainment should have some depth to it, but at the end of the day, the point is to have fun. How often do you get to have fun in a day? And in stand-up comedy. Another large influence on me is the storytelling of Bill Cosby. Essentially what I'm trying to do is tell stories, and I want to take my characters seriously. They're ridiculous, but they don't know that they're ridiculous. If General Specific is upset, let him really be upset. If Lady Richington is outraged, really have her be outraged. I think that's how you weld a story, and you try to find a theme for each story: friendship, the cost of fame, or family relationships. In helping to execute the creative vision, Williams tabbed 2 writers to assist him in his endeavor. I want to highlight them briefly to give some insight into the comedic direction of this show. The first is Joseph Masourino, who has worn several different hats working on Sesame Street, including that of head writer, director, lyricist, and Muppet performer. He's received 25 Emmy Awards for his work in multiple categories on the show, and had worked with Mo Willems for 8 years on Sesame Street prior to this project. The other writer I was shocked to learn is the severely underrated talent David Wayne, who you may know as the director of the movies Wet Hot American Summer, Role Models, Wanderlust, the television show Children's Hospital, and the insanely funny comedy group Stella. The stage was set for Willems' brainchild to become an animated reality, and the Cartoon Network brass believed in this show, trying to get sheep in the viewing public's eye with what they called sheepstakes. A week before the show aired, quote, Cartoon Network sent out voicemail messages to more than 2,200 executives at licensing and promotion partners, advertising agencies, and cable affiliates, hoping to build a relationship with our cartoons so that they'll keep their eyes on them. The executives were sent episodes of Sheep in the Big City, which featured instructions on how to enter and win tickets to a trip to Ireland, really banking on the sheep angle. And apparently it worked. Sheep in the Big City came in as the highest rated premiere among the network's original series when the show finally aired. Now let's dive into the meat of the show. The characters are loads of fun. I'm going to give the rundown of the main characters and a few of the ones I found most entertaining. Our main character is a sheep named Sheep. He's a silent protagonist, assuming you don't count ba as speech. He's a vapid-looking character with a blank stare and a stretched-out mouth, looking like he doesn't know what to do with it. But he's such a likable character to look at. If you check out Williams' other works, you'll see he has an eye for how to design an animal that can make an impact with very basic modeling. The show's antagonist, General Specific, is the leader of the secret military organization trying to capture sheep. He's dumb but determined, complains when he doesn't get his way, but always scheming and quite frankly, pretty likable, maintaining a quality friendship with his second-in-command, Private Public, the voice of reason to General Specific's craziness. He's level-headed and very reasonable, but also able to be bossed around by his more dominant leader. There's Swanky, Sheep's love interest, a pink poodle that can never be with Sheep, not because she doesn't like him back, but because of her owner, Lady Richington, a wealthy woman of the town who hates sheep, hitting him with her titanium wig whenever she sees him. The narrator is my favorite side character though. Formerly known as Ben Plotz, the narrator is an ornery, fourth wall breaking character. If he sees an inconsistency with the story he's narrating, or something unbelievable happens, he'll complain, letting the audience know his displeasure. He steals the scenes in many of the episodes. At the end of each episode, we get an onstage appearance from the Ranting Swede, a Swedish man who goes on minutes-long rants about something in his life that irritates him. His energy is infectious, and oftentimes are one of the highlights of each episode. And finally, one of the most minor recurring characters, Jay, is an elderly man who reads signs. It sounds innocuous enough, but he's entirely based on the tropes of characters reading. I'm sure you've seen a sign in a show, and the character reads it out loud. If you think about it, why would they do that on their own? Jay reads the signs and it sounds like a narration in the character's mind, but then it cuts away to a full shot from the sign and we see him standing next to whoever's reading, stating that he likes to read. You can't convince me it's never not amusing. Now that the wheels were set in motion with a talented staff and a strong push by the network in hopes of having the show be a success, let's look at the visual aspect. One of my favorite facets of the show is its art style. Characters are bizarre looking, with both eyes on the front of their face, colored differently from each other, fully embracing and accentuating the two-dimensional feel of the show. Everything is so interesting to look at. Characters are disproportioned, whether it's their body types, their bulging eyes, obtusely angled jaws and hips, protruding brows that give them so much personality, even if they're just briefly present to deliver throwaway lines. I imagine them as characters that come to life in paintings once the lights are off in a museum. They're fun to look at and just inspect. You can definitely see this line work and color scheming in the backgrounds. They look like they're drawn quickly, some lines being longer than the other, nothing precisely on scale, but stylized in a way whereas someone was drawing fine art on a bar napkin from memory. They're not these grand works, as they're backgrounds in a kid's cartoon, but they are masterfully done by someone who clearly cares and knows about different artistic fashions, and also is aware how to make them appealing and accessible to the layman's viewing them. When you stop to look at them, they really are loose tributes to the artist who provided the foundation for his visual expressiveness. There definitely is a hint of less is more, and what little you do have, really make it stand out, DIY approach, building of the world and its citizens. Willems attributes this to his appreciation for Pablo Picasso and similar art techniques. Quote, "I find the fact that I can't draw very well attracts me to a minimalist style. While I enjoy all forms of drawing, a single line, simply done, is more beautiful than 100 little lines sort of approximating the right thing. I like my characters to be two-dimensional. Just because you can do something in 3D doesn't make it better. I want my line to be focused, so the emotions of a character are clear." The closest I can equate it to character-wise are Nickelodeon's Doug with the multicolored characters, and also the video game franchise Parappa the Rapper, with the oddball background and characters that range from living dogs, flowers, bugs, and food products. The animation fluidity also shares some similarities, just vaguely, but the two somehow remind me of each other. Now, the structure of the show is episodic, with no real overarching storyline. Each episode is based into 3 chapters. Chapter 1 begins at the start of each show, with Sheep watching a television program before changing the channel to his own show's intro. After the first commercial break, we have Chapter 2. This is when we take a break from the sheep-centric part of the show and are treated to a completely unrelated sketch. Sometimes it's a character soliloquy, sometimes a commercial, or a political ad from a ham sandwich. It's very reminiscent of Ren and Stimpy, where they would play fake ads for products such as log, or introduce new characters like Powdered Toast Man. When coming back from the final commercial break, we get to Chapter 3. The fun here is reserved after the main storyline concludes. We're at the very end of the episode when we get final thoughts from a stage by the Ranting Swede. Sheep in the Big City is the kind of show where the focus is less on plot and more on the comedy. The plot acts as a conduit for the characters to be inserted into a scenario where certain jokes will play out. In one episode, Sheep becomes the spokesmodel for a brand of dish detergent, so the gags mostly revolve around the perils of fame, modeling, etc. Having said that, it's not your typical fare. Far from it. It's one of the most meta, wink at the camera without winking at the camera, grab bag of every kind of comedy you can take from. It feels almost like a group of people making a cartoon that's making fun of what cartoons are by way of making a cartoon. Simply put, it's best described as madcap. I've never seen a cartoon featuring so many different forms of comedy with as many jokes. It's unbelievable. Rewatching it since the first time it aired, I was admittedly a bit overwhelmed. There was so much mental stimulation from all the types of gags, it was hard to keep up. Once I finally did reach the pace of the show, I had an appreciation for how comedically complex it was. There's every type of comedy here. First, situational. Being a sitcom of sorts, it naturally will be. But the overlying joke of the show is how this sheep lives in a society of people and how they react to him as a member. It's closest to in the show Animaniacs, the character Chicken Boo. The chicken who tries to assimilate into society by dressing as a human, only to get found out by the end of each episode. Sheep is trying to live an ordinary life, and even though people accept him, once he does something they don't like, they blame it on him being a sheep. Then we come to the verbal comedy, which the rate of jokes you get is staggering. Each time a character speaks, it's either a setup or a punchline. It's astounding how rapid fire the amount of lines is in any particular scene. It makes your mind almost tap dance just to keep up. The true specialty of Sheep is its strong leaning into literal humor. Without any hint of ironic attachment, it goes full force with its wordplay. As a fan of David Wayne, this is where I see his influence the most, specifically from the background of his comedy troupe Stella. They frequently play with surrealist and literal humor. I'll give an example. In one of the Stella shorts, the three men adopt a kitten. When one of them asks what he's feeding it, he says, "Fish," and the camera cuts to the cat attempting to eat a CD from the band Fish. Some of my favorite gags in the entire series are these kind of jokes. My favorites being one, where the narrator of the show introduces a man reading poetry, only to cut to a man reading a book of poetry to himself, not out loud. The realization of what it means versus what my brain identifies the phrase reading poetry made me laugh out loud. My other favorite was when one character says to another, "It's funny you mentioned that," and the two engage in hysterical laughter with the other character saying, "That was funny." It's so literal and ridiculous, I positively love it. And as I brought up before, there's another vibe that the show gives off. It feels like a parody of a cartoon. Like it was made by people who were making fun of the medium of animated comedies. Think of it like this. It's the most ridiculous premise. The main character is an ironic hero who really doesn't do anything to be given that title. They address the absurdity in a way that it's meta, but doesn't break the fourth wall. The characters live in their world, and seem to know they're in a cartoon, but don't know what that means on a larger scale. They understand cartoon logic and how it operates, one of the best examples being when Sheep attempts to escape being trapped in the secret military base by stepping over the line that celebrates the background scene of the base to the outside world. They never address the audience directly, but they seem to know they're part of a story. They break the third and a half wall, if that makes sense. The biggest element that goes unnoticed are the songs. Co-written by Mo Willems and Julian Harris, these musical numbers are wonderfully concocted, not only sounding great, but having really funny lyrics. If there's one thing I wish there were more of throughout the seasons, it would be them. Whether it's the disco song parroting the high singing of that era, or a song about bureaucrats, there wasn't a song from either season that I didn't love. In the first episode, a street performer sings an acoustic song about being a sheep in the big city, and when Sheep hears the song, he busts out a trombone and plays along. Don't sleep on these ditties. They're as catchy as they are funny. Speaking briefly on both seasons, each one contains 13 episodes. There is a difference between the two, at least to me. In Season 1, the episodes are more freeform, meaning there is a plot to each episode, but it's more focused on comedy stylings, with the conflict as more of a backdrop. Season 2 is definitely more conventional, in that it's storyline-centric. The laughs are still there, they're just more dictated by what's happening to the characters in each adventure. Having said that, there are a lot of great episodes across both seasons. Here's a few of my picks as favorite episodes, and the best of the series. The pilot episode, In the Ba-Genning. Sheep is being pursued by the secret military organization, so he leaves the farm to live and hide out in the big city. Season 1, Episode 4, Belle of the Ba. Sheep accidentally swallows a diamond and starts enjoying the good life because of it. Season 1, Episode 10, Fleeced to Meet You. General Specific hires a double agent Sheep to befriend Sheep in order to capture him. In Season 2, Episode 6, Party of the Shear. Sheep tries to liven up his dull life by going to a disco, but his wild times just may end up getting him killed. So what happened to Sheep in the Big City? Unfortunately, it came to an end after its second season. Ironically enough, the show that was the most viewed Cartoon Network original at the time was cancelled due to low ratings despite being lauded by critics. Success was soon to follow though, as Willems was hired later that year to become head writer of the beloved Cartoon Network show, codename Kids Next Door, where he would hold that position for the first 4 seasons. He would end up leaving the show to pursue what seems to be his true calling, writing children's books, and he appears to be quite good at it, as evidenced by this long list of awards and honors he's received. He's been awarded the Carnegie Medal twice, the first time in 2007 and the second in 2015. In 2005, one of his books was selected as a Time magazine Best Children's Book. In 2006, he was awarded a Book Sense Book of the Year honor book in 2006. He's won the Theodore Seuss Geisel Award twice. In 2019, was named the Kennedy Center's first education artist in residence, and had a book on the New York Times bestseller list for 11 weeks running, and was also described by the New York Times Book Review as the biggest new talent to emerge thus far in the 2000s. So this guy is the real deal. Regarding Sheep in the Big City, it seems that Willems was pleased with his experience with the show. Cartoon Network has a good handle on what this show is about, and kudos to them, cause it's a hard sell. It's adult and kid. There's a huge cast, there are sketches in between, it breaks all kinds of formats, and the lead character doesn't speak. Since Harpo Marx, when have you got a lead character that doesn't speak? Sheep has all those odd things, and the network still gets it. To me, Sheep in the Big City is one of the most insane shows I've ever seen, but not in a negative way. More so, that of an insane genius. When there's so many thoughts and ideas bouncing around in your head, and it comes out in ways you'd never expect. It's uniquely funny in ways that I haven't seen in cartoons for a long time, or at least altogether, and it's clearly influenced shows now. It reminds me of Air.
But Farmer John's not the only one interested in sheep. Let's not forget the intense work going on with
General Specific. You have a call on the video spectrographinator screen device thing.
If I had to
Who is it
compare
from,
to
Private
something,
Public?
I would
General
say it's
Lee
closest
Outrageous.
to
My
Leslie
crazy
Nielsen
cousin
from
whom
the
I'm
man.
locked in a jealous battle with,
From a man
and I've
who's
never
seemingly
mentioned
done it-
before?
That would be
From
the
a
one.
man who's seemingly done it all in kids' entertainment, being the head writer for Sesame Street and Codename Kids Next Door, writing numerous award-winning books, creating a cult cartoon, I feel it's best to
None
let
of your
him describe
business,
what he wants.
General Lee Outrageous. Now, what do you want? Because I'm a busy general here.
I get great joy when I see teachers all over the country teaching kids how to make word bubbles and how to be expressive with dialogue and type size and
What
fonts.
do you do?
Because when I was a kid
It
in
won't work
school
if
many,
you don't have
many
a
years ago,
goat.
my art teacher would throw away my cartoons and say they didn't have value. I am so glad those days are
Hubba,
over.
hubba.
I like to think that my work has been a small part of that change.
Look!
And if I
I
could
could
be proud
really
of one
be
thing,
in the using of some
if I could
stairs
be proud
here.
of one thing
I
in my
would,
career,
but
it would
cut
be
back,
that.
you know? Now listen to me. If you can't figure out a way to capture that sheep in time for General Lee Outrageous's party, I'm gonna get me a new mad scientist.
Angry! Are you in the saying of that to get my goat?
Yeah.
The doop scap clabby cloop. Cloop clap, nippy dip dap, skaddy was at cafe. That's quite a mouthful. And so is this. My main sheep. Sorry, Daddy-O. No squares allowed. Cool clothing shop. Chicken.